finding time to be here with us early this morning. And to quickly kickstart this interview, you were at Citizen TV about 2.5 months ago. You spoke to Hussein Mohammed and you gave your thoughts on what was then the beginning of a very seemingly serious fight against corruption led by President Uhuru Kenyatta. I want to pick up on a comment that you said during that interview. Let's listen to that comment now. Okay,
inevitably, very inevitably, this is going to touch on his friends, political and personal, perhaps even his family, and it's what he does at that moment that will determine whether we will kama tutapasua au tutakwama. That is at that point that really the difficult decisions need to be made.
Even as we prepare to hear what the president had to say this weekend, John Githongo seeming to have a prophetic gift there. That was 2 months ago, and he said inevitably the president will have to, in a sense, deal with some of his friends and possibly his family members as well. And just this past weekend, this is what the president had to say on the same note.
And I believe that we need to join together and fight this battle, because surely that is the only way that our dream will become a reality. So as we were told, let us lose friends. We will gain others as we move forward. Let us lose friends and do that which is right in the eyes of God.
All right. So you could almost see into the future 2 months ago that it would get to this. Let me get your take on that most recent statement by the president and sort of where we are right now in the fight against corruption.
Yes, I mean, when we spoke a couple of months ago, I mean, the point was that if you're going to take corruption seriously in a country like Kenya, where it's endemic, it's systemic, and the president has been very articulate about it. But now it's encouraging. He is actually... You
feel encouraged by what you're seeing?
I feel encouraged. I think he still needs... He's losing friends. He needs to lose quite a few more. Yes, I don't think we are out of the woods yet, but I think we are seeing some little green shoots of the beginning of positive action in the fight against corruption. And you know, when he makes that kind of revelation, if he's not receiving telephone calls from people who are begging him for consideration, then he's not really doing anything beyond talking. And so one would encourage him to keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on.
That's right.
In that same interview that you did 2 months or so ago, you spoke about Kenyans being cautious as they take a look at how the battle is being fought. You also spoke about the new players in town, the new DPP, the new AG, the new DCI boss. So effectively, your perspective then has changed.
No, I think that we still have a situation where the old order has changed slightly. I think that with the new head of the DCI, Bwana Kinoti, Bwana Haji at ODPP, and Bwana Kihara as the AG, something has changed. And positively, it has also seemed to kickstart the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Which you have raised a lot of questions about in the past.
I have raised a lot of questions about them, but you know, I think with a little bit of competition, they seem to have upped their game. They almost seem to be competing with the DCI. And so that is encouraging. I remain cautious, but perhaps more cautiously optimistic now that if we can keep this up, it will only succeed not because of the statements that the president makes, but when ordinary Kenyans believe him and believe that this is real. We've been here before when we've been quite excited and quite encouraged. In 2015, if you remember, the list of shame, and I was in these studios once again and everyone was talking about it. So that is a reason Kenyans are cautious and hesitant. But watching very keenly now what is going on, one would like to see a lot more of it, that we can begin to slay this monster that has forced Kenya, very sadly, to lose 20 years of economic progress in terms of our own economic sovereignty as a country. That we're now back in the hands of the IMF is really, really embarrassing and shameful.
In 2016, John Githongo, on another TV station, you told the host of that program that this government is by far the most corrupt government in Kenya's history. I watched that interview yesterday. More corrupt than the one you served in that led to the book, It's Our Time to Eat.
Yeah.
Would you still say that now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there is no question about it. When one looks at the amounts of monies lost or misappropriated or which cannot be accounted for in single scams under Jubilee, they count for 2 or 3 years of corruption under previous regimes. That's unfortunate. We have, say, the Eurobond scandal, where you're talking about billions of dollars.
And you're still not convinced with the sort of explanations given by Treasury? The President talked about it.
I think one of the things that, one of the hard choices that the President is going to have to make is around individuals like the Cabinet Secretary Bonarotich at Treasury. It's been disastrous. We have the former DPP, Bonatobiko, who was promoted. And we see his replacement, Bonahaji. How does Bonatobiko get promoted into the cabinet after doing such a very lackluster job as DPP? Those are the kind of contradictions that cause people to remain cautious. So I insist on that especially from 2013 until the beginning of this year, it was an extraordinary level of corruption that you have chronicled yourselves as media very, very closely.
What do you think has changed? Can a leopard change its spots?
Saul fell off a donkey and became Paul. There are those who are cynical who say a leopard can never change its spots, but those who are involved in the fight against corruption, you have to be optimistic. I think, I would like to think, I don't know what is going on in his own mind. I think the President must recognize this is his last term constitutionally. And if he wants a legacy, it's not the big four. It's not housing, it's not building railways, it's dealing with corruption. Because, and he has said it, he has said that his big four will not happen if the level of corruption continues. And it's not only his legacy, but our history as a country, as Kenya, is inextricably intertwined with the history of the Kenyatta family. Because the President's father was our founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And if Uhuru blows it, he blows it for that name. That's the end of the brand. And I would like to think that he can recover that by leaving a legacy of having at least dealt a good foundation for the fight against corruption going forward.
You've studied governance around the world. You've traveled speaking about it. Yeah. Have you seen situations like what we're seeing in Kenya, where a government, for the first 5 years seemingly went one direction and then, without any notice, did an abrupt about turn and went in a completely different direction? There
is no precedent that I can think of that is not driven by political expediency. However, in any developing country, an anti-corruption fight is always political, and so you'll have a lot of complaints. I think that's part of the reason the President is receiving telephone calls and complaints, and that's just a reality. There is no precedent, but I am perhaps, a believer in Kenyan exceptionalism. Maybe we can break from the mold.
History and the mold.
Yes, I don't know. There is no precedent for such a drastic change.
If the President were to call you and tell you, John Githongo, come sit with my team, whatever team is running this, let's work together, would you?
Well, I've never refused to give the President advice, and he knows that.
You did once. He invited you.
For a junket. For a junket, please.
Hang on. Do we have that little clip there where the President... we won't play all of it, just a little bit of it. Let's listen in.
I'm actually only disappointed that my friend Githongo, who is always out there, he is a great opportunity to challenge. I can see Minister Balala, everybody is here. Why didn't he come? Why didn't he come and raise those issues that he raises everywhere? Raise it here. Let's debate it. Because the issue is that if people discuss, as I've always said, what the problems are, we get solutions.
If people discuss, then we'll get solutions.
Sitting in a conference, which this administration has been extremely good at, wasn't my idea of actually having a constructive discussion about corruption, about issues, the solution to which we already know. And I think that, yes, one can hold meetings and conversations around corruption. But, I was invited for that event the night before.
You got an invite the night before?
The night before. So
what are we talking about, midnight, 11 p.m.?
No, at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon,
okay,
a card was delivered to my office by somebody who did not tell me what I was supposed to do, what I was supposed to say. Now, let's be serious with each other. When you invited me here to this show this morning,
I've been looking for you for about a month.
But you told me what you wanted. Yes. Yeah, and I was able to prepare. It's fair to me, it's fair to you, and it's fair to your viewers. Yeah, you can't slap something together simply to varnish your credibility or your image. And I don't believe it's my part to be to play that kind of role. And so, yes, I'll avoid junkets. I'll avoid things that are done for show. Totally. I don't care who calls them. If it's serious, then we're happy to engage. Okay. And it doesn't have to be in public. It doesn't have to, even if it's in private, happy to do it.
That's going to make a difference. Let me ask you this. You've raised the issue of how much money has been lost under the Jubilee administration, some in sort of scandals that have been well covered by the media, and in others where there's a lot of back and forth about whether money was actually lost or not. My question to you is the issue of now money being returned. So we've seen the so-called big fish being hauled to court, but a section of Kenyans are still asking, when are we going to start seeing money sort of being returned back to public coffers? Let me get your thoughts on what needs to be done in regards to that, if the figures that you've quoted and David D have quoted as the money we've lost are to be believed.
I think, quite understandably, Kenyans have reached a point where they're exhausted with the, it seems to be a cycle that corruption grows. The media reports it. It's on the front pages of the media. People like Bwana Maura are inviting John Githongo into the studio. It's every 2 months. It's a bit of a cycle. I'll be back here in 2 months. Hope not for this kind of thing. So that cycle exhausts people. We see people going into court, sometimes smiling at Kenyans, almost laughing at us, almost looking down at us, come on, Madarao against us. So people no longer believe that very much. It's exciting for a while. It makes the good press. And I think Kenyans are on the right track when they begin to ask, we need some restitution. We need people to pay back. We need the assets that are properly public assets to be returned to the public. And I think that's why there's been some excitement of a different kind around this destruction of illegally constructed properties on riparian land in Nairobi. That's why the excitement about that is quite different than the excitement you're getting about people being hauled to court. Because the court side of things we've seen before. Secondly, globally, the bluntest instrument available in the fight against corruption is the court process. It's the least successful. The people who you're dragging to court use the money they've stolen to defend themselves. Those cases can take a long time. And so I'm glad some of the noises that we've heard from people around this fight within the government is that there is a greater focus on restitution, on assets being recovered and being returned to public coffers. I think that's what Kenyans want to see as we go about the fight against corruption now. They're no longer as excited about people being dragged into court with a lot of fanfare.
Okay, they need to see a bit more than that. Let's talk about the body that's supposed to be the voice of Kenyans Parliament. The allegations that have come out, that it is possible, I like your smile, it shows that possibly what you're thinking, that a section of MPs may have received anywhere between 10,000 to 30,000 Kenya shillings to block a report on sugar. And this is something that has concerned Kenyans for some time. Should these allegations prove to be true, what does that tell you about the state of the nation?
Corruption is systemic. There's a sense in which our MPs are reflections of us. And there are those who argue that we get the leaders that we deserve. If there's corruption in the cabinet, if the budget document itself is a document that is full of streams, of corruption. So one is not very surprised when one hears what's going on in Parliament. The kind of reports that we've seen over the last few days have been really not that much of a new thing. This has happened before in Kenya, and it's you know, especially the parliamentary committees that are investigating corruption allegations. These accusations have been there for a long time. I would like to think, in the spirit of the new energy to fight corruption, the person I'm watching to see what he does is Justin Muturi.
Okay.
Let's see what the speaker does. This is his moment. Either he passes or he fails.
Or he fails.
He takes action with regard to this. Because again, Kenyans are pretty disgusted, you know, that 10,000 bob.
Do you think Kenyans are back where they were in 2003, 2004, when they personally took a stand against corruption, when you could see Kenyans telling matatu touts, don't bribe policemen, policewomen? Are we there?
It remains to be seen. I don't feel it. I've seen a few videos being circulated on social media of traffic policemen being arrested. The president recently called on the youth to effect citizens' arrest against officers who engage in corruption. It remains to be seen. Let's see. Ultimately, if it gets to the point where organically Kenyans are that energized in the fight against corruption, then it succeeds.
And that's where you feel that that's where we need to get to?
We have to get there. We have to get there when you are stopped and somebody asks for money and you say, no, I'm not. And you're not fearful that it's going to be such a huge disruption on your life that you're going to spend the next several months in court. You know, usually people don't pay bribes because they're thieves or they're corrupt, especially you know poor people. It's because it's extorted from them. Somebody stops you for some purpose or some excuse, and then you're forced to make the choice right there. I was on my way to work, or I was on the way to hospital, I was on the way to school, with the kids in the car. 500 bob can make this go away.
It's a lot simpler.
Or I am not going to do that, and it's, what's the scale of the disruption to my life? And if we collectively, as Kenyans, can make a choice that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior, then we reduce the cost to ourselves of being hostile to people who are being corrupt.
I want to get your thoughts on this. When I Google your name, a lot of one particular description really pops up in many of the articles: whistleblower.
Yeah.
What would you say to civil servants watching this program right now? They see things are happening, they know they are not right, but they don't know how to go about it. Would you tell them to go public about it? What sort of safety or security would they get, you know, in terms of doing that? You've been in government before.
We ostensibly, I mean, it's one of the big tests of both the new constitution and the laws that have been put in place, because we now have instruments, legal instruments that have been put in place to protect whistleblowers in Kenya. They exist, and they haven't been tested.
They haven't been tested.
They haven't been tested. And the reason they haven't been tested is that the public servants still don't have faith in them. And until they feel a bit of confidence, we shall not see them working. But I believe that the legal infrastructure is in place. But as we've learned, Kenya is very good at drafting good laws and good policies. Implementation is different. With a bit of political will, it's possible for these to be implemented. Number one. Number two, when I look at all the reporting that we've seen, including here at Citizen and your competitors, the front page stories we've seen over the past few weeks around the corruption that's been going on, it's clear that has been coming from public servants.
So there's somebody somewhere leaking this information.
It's not the product of in-depth, month-long investigations. You know, this is information that's coming from within the system. So I believe people are discreetly blowing the whistle even now.
Okay, and that's a good place to be. Let me get your final thoughts on this. Malaysia's fight against corruption is making global headlines. Right. I'm calling him the new old leader. That's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. A few interesting things have happened. One, recently he threatened to cancel all China-backed infrastructure projects unless China were willing to negotiate. Secondly, we also know that the former Prime Minister, his predecessor, faces sort of charges against, if I can get this right, a 1 MDB state investment fund.
Yes.
Some say that Kenya could borrow a leaf from Malaysia. What do you think about?
I I think Maura, you've raised a wonderful example of what's happened in Malaysia and the way Professor Mahathir Mohamad is going about it. I think the whole election there was in a part driven by the 1MDB scandal in its sheer scale and impunity with which, and the conspicuous consumption that was displayed by the former Prime Minister and his acolytes. So I think that one of the strategic choices that Mahathir Mohamad has made, which is very encouraging, is that whereas China remains an important ally, an important strategic partner of Malaysia, he has told the Chinese, please, we need to review some of our contracts with you. Some of them perhaps we do not need and are too expensive. I think the time has come for we as Kenyans to do the same thing, because we are in a debt hole that is forcing us into the hands of the IMF, from which we had extricated ourselves, partly to repay debts for goods that are being delivered whose utility is still questionable. And I think that we need to have the courage to also tell our Chinese friends, they are our friends, they are our partners, guys, we can't afford to pay all this money. Wacha tukae chini tuongee. I think, yeah, we need to borrow a leaf from Malaysia as Kenya. Otherwise, it is you. Once your petrol prices are going up next month.
Yes, they are.
This is the reason. So
your last, would I be misquoting you if you were to tell President Uhuru Kenyatta, keep going, lose more friends, renegotiate some of these deals?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And get rid of some of the friends he has in cabinet.
Some of the friends he has
in cabinet need to go.
David D says he should take his investigations all the way to the top.
Absolutely. It is not possible to have the level of corruption we've had in Kenya without it being covered by people who sit around him when he has a cabinet meeting. Out of the question.
Out of the question.
Out of the question.
John Githongo, thank you so much
for
having this very candid chat.
Thank you, Maura.
I hope we'll be talking something different in 3-4 months from now.
I hope so too.
Not going round and round.
As Kenyans, I think it would be a great thing if we come here and we're talking about something new, positive and successful.
Thank you so much. He's the CEO of Inuka Kenya Limited, but of course famously known as a former governance and ethics permanent secretary, a whistleblower in some quarters, with a book that really revealed a lot about what happens in government behind the scenes. Thank you once again, John Githongo. Friend Ndimuli, you have some more updates for us. Over to you now.